Hello, my name is Ian Moore. I conduct walking tours around Sunderland about topics such as the shipyard girls and the World War II in Sunderland, also lost shops and stores, and the music scene in the 1960s to the 1980s. Today I'm going to talk about the bridges in Sunderland. There's maybe more than you thought. Now, as we know, Sunderland is a community that's been sundered by the River Wear. These days we don't really think about it. We're on the bus or on the metro or walk around in a car and we just zip across and probably don't give it much thought. But until the first bridge was built, 1796, this was a major problem for people to get across the river. There was either probably a ford, possibly a bridge between North and South Hilton. If you know more about that, please leave a comment in the comments below. There was certainly some kind of crossing there. So unlike now, where everything goes across the centre of the city, everybody who had a cart full of goods or something would have to trundle up to Hilton on the north and the south sides of the river and cross over there. So it was a bit less convenient than it is now. There were a number of ferries, and one of them was here till, well, some people watching this, if you're over 75, you might remember the ferry. So let's go and take a look where that ferry was. So the ferry that some older viewers may remember was the one that ran from straight across there, from Bodelwell Lane. There's no original buildings there anymore. So it ran from there and it came across just to the angle of the river there. A lot of people call it Folly End. So the journey time took about 4 minutes and it cost a halfpenny. Now, you might think, well, why bother? But if you were working at jail at Thompson's and you had to walk all the way up to the Wear Bridge and across and back down to Hendon after a long day at work, it was a lot of extra graft. So nipping across here for 4 minutes for a halfpenny, it was worth it. If you've read the Shipyard Girls story, the ferry figures quite prominently. There were two ferries in the 20th century. I think the last one was WF Vint, and WF, I imagine, meant Wear Ferry. So the council didn't want to run it anymore, so in 1957 they closed the service and they sold the WF Vint to a company in Humberside. Now, I don't know what happened. They towed it down there, or it went under its own steam. Probably they towed it, I think, from my memory of the photographs. But when it arrived on the Humber, it sank the next day. So what all that was about, I do not know. Possibly, I mean, it wasn't really designed for travelling on rough seas. It might have taken on a load of water or something, but it sank the next day, and that was that. Another important ferry was one near where Alexandra Bridge is now. It was quite a big one. You could take a horse and a carriage on there. So that was still in use till about when they opened the bridge in 1909. Some of you will have seen photographs of a much smaller concern. Basically, it was one man in a rowing boat. He was between South Hilton and North Hilton. Now, the only pictures I've seen of him, he's quite an old man with a big white moustache, but he might well have done that job all of his life. So ferries didn't come free, of course. So most people, maybe they had to jump in a friend's boat, or they might have had a little boat of their own. Chealfrith, who was the abbot of Monk Wearmouth, there's a passage about him travelling across the Wear in a boat. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen the wooden canoe in the Sunderland Museum. Now, they found that 1888 somewhere between Pallion and South Hilton. And they thought at first it was maybe 2,000 years old. It's probably nearer 700 anyway. It's nice to know people were paddling about in those days. Anyway, 1796 is when we had the first major bridge in Sunderland. It was made of iron and it was in the same location as the present one is. It's designed by a guy called Thomas Payne. And it looks a bit funny because it's quite rounded. You're like walking up a bit of an incline to get to the middle and then down again. So most bridges are flat these days, of course. In 1842, something rather unusual happened. There was a shipwrecked American sailor called Michael Smith. And he was bereft. He was far from home with no money. So he was thinking of ways to raise a few bob, and he publicised a stunt where he would dive off the bridge. And a lot of people came to watch him, probably thinking he was going to die, but in fact he survived. And he raised quite a lot of money. But the police arrested him for begging. I don't know whether they confiscated the takings, but he was a bit of a cult hero. If you go to Sunderland Museum, there's a sculptured glass tankard, I suppose you would call it, called the Michael Smith Rummer, for drinking rum from, presumably. And he was celebrated in a local ballad. Anyway, for 1859, we had a new bridge. It was designed by Robert Stevenson, son of George, who was a major railway engineer all over the country. And that one survived till 1929 when the present bridge was completed. Now, I don't know what you call the bridge, I just call it the bridge. But my friend who's a taxi driver in Sunderland said most people call it the town bridge. I've never actually heard anybody say that. Not the city bridge, you notice. So they built the new bridge around the framework, basically, the old bridge, so they could continue having traffic going across while they were building it. I mean, you see a lot of pictures of people working there with minimum health and safety. And I heard anecdotal stories that 5 or 6 blokes died when you see them on top of the bridge with no kind of harnesses, just a fag and a cloth cap. And it was very, especially in icy weather, would have been easy to slip off. So the bridge was designed by Sir William Carroll and Company in Glasgow, and everything was manufactured there and of course transported down here. They'd had a bit of practice, that company, because they built a 4th rail bridge and also a Tower Bridge. Now, we used to see in Tower Bridge, looks like a bit of a castle, so it matches nearby Tower of London, but of course it's got a steel framework inside it. It looks very funny if you see it before they put the stone cladding on the outside. The opening ceremony of this bridge was 31st of October 1929. The ceremony was performed by the Duke of York, who later became, rather to his surprise I suppose, King George VI. I just discovered recently there's a video, and he goes up on a little sort of raised area and he knocks in the final rivet. Now, I've heard people say it was a silver rivet, a platinum rivet. Now, whether he actually put the rivet in, I don't know for sure, because there's a real rivet standing next to him, and then we see a pair of hands, but not the face of the future king, banging the rivet in with a little gun. So whether it was him or not, I don't know. Maybe they didn't want to risk him knocking himself doing it. So I'm sure it's still there, whether it's silver or whatever it is, or just steel. So the bridge right next to the Wearmouth Bridge, I just call it the Railway Bridge. But I think it's officially called the Monk-Wearmouth Railway Bridge or the Wearmouth Railway Bridge. Some people even call it the Harrison Bridge. I've never heard anybody say that actually. But it was designed by a guy called Thomas Harrison, who was born in Fulham, but spent most of his life in the northeast as he became the chief engineer for the North Eastern Railway. It's a very big company. So the construction of this bridge facilitated north-south travel directly through Sunderland. You might have seen my previous video about the railways of Sunderland. So until 1879, when they built this one, Monk-Wearmouth Station over here, beautiful building, was the main station in Sunderland with the Royal Hotel next door. That had been built in 1848. Meanwhile, on the south side of the river, we had Fawcett Street Station, and we had a station in Hendon, which had been at Town Moor previously. So we had 3 different stations going in 3 different directions with nothing linking it up. So when this was completed, Sunderland Central Station, now just Sunderland Station, was also built, and the 2 smaller stations, Fawcett Street and Hendon, were closed, so we had direct north-south travel, and that was a great boost to the town. So it's been basically unchanged since then. The metro arrived in 2002 and they had to adapt it for that. And in 2007, I think it was, they put a couple of hundred strengthening beams across the centre of it. Just, it must have been getting a bit shaky in its old age. A bridge that we can't visit because it's in the docks is the Gladstone Swing Bridge. Now, Newcastle's famous for their swing bridge, but we have one as well. So it was constructed in Hudson Dock in the 19th century. Most of the mechanical bits came from Armstrong's factory in Elsick on Tyneside. So, as its name implies, it swung from side to side to allow big vessels to pass through in and out of the docks. And it was still working in 2018 when the tall ships race was on, so there was quite a bit of activity at that time. It originally had a railway going across, but it doesn't have the railway anymore now. Now, I know a lot of viewers won't be in England. Maybe you're in Australia or South Africa or somewhere and you won't have been in the town for a very long time. So perhaps the view behind me is a completely new one. So this new bridge, it's called the Keel Crossing, is just about to open at the time of recording. There was a lot of debate about what to call it, and I quite like the sound of Regis Le Bridge. If you don't know who Regis is, he's the manager of Sunderland, and hopefully for a long time to come. Anyway, it's called the Keel Crossing. It links up with a new area called Keel Square, which, if you don't know, is around where Keel Bridge and High Street Baths used to be. So there's been major development going on there. The new culture house is going to be there, and there's a lot of places for eating and drinking opening up there. So on the north side, the sheepfolds area, which belonged to the railways in the past and has been semi-derelict for donkey's years. That's been developed greatly. There's a lot of new bars, including a new restaurant by the hairy biker. There's all sorts of things going on there. So this will link up these two parts. It also links up with the Stadium of Light, of course, very importantly. Now, a mate of mine, Arthur, he died December 1983, and we were watching the early stages of the bridge being constructed, and we were saying, oh, we'll be able to have one extra pint in Fitzgerald's in the time it'll save us to nip across to the match from here. So sadly, he never saw that happen. Again, the bridge wasn't manufactured in Sunderland. The main parts were manufactured in Ghent, in Belgium. And there's lots of videos of them being shipped up the river and hoisted up and assembled, and it all fitted perfectly. So it's going to be for pedestrians and bicycles, I think. And I think it'll be a great asset to the town. So they're just putting the finishing touches off there now. So another major bridge in Sunderland is the Queen Alexandra Bridge, to give the full title. Most people call it Alexander Bridge. Anyway, that was constructed very quickly when you think about it, between 1907 and 1909. And it was also constructed by Sir William Arrol in Glasgow, and the parts shipped down here. The central part, I think it weighed 2,600 tons, and it was the heaviest bridge in the UK at that time. So this is when they obviously didn't use the ferry nearby anymore. So it was of two parts, road bridge and a rail bridge. And sadly, the rail bridge never worked out, because it was intended to bring coal from various local coal mines, obviously, down to the South Docks to be loaded onto ships. But the trade just died up, so by about 1920, that was the last train. There was, well, you can still see it actually, there's a nice photo of them testing the bridge to see if it would take a heavy load. So they've got 5 or 6 big locos going over the top. So they must have done the calculations carefully to make sure it wouldn't collapse. Personally, I never liked that bridge too much. I always found it a bit miserable, because it's very contained. It's not like the Wearmouth Bridge, which is nice and bright and open. Of course, it's not really so aesthetic, but it's very practical. Another important bridge is the Hilton Viaduct, which opened in 1974. It's both a road bridge and a pedestrian bridge. There was actually a chain ferry under there, in addition to the man in his rowing boat, that closed in 1915. So the last major bridge I want to talk about is the Northern Spire, which opened in 2018. I think it's a very beautiful bridge. Some people claimed it wasn't needed, but I think it's very good to have a fast access directly into the town and down to the docks. So again, most of the bridge was manufactured overseas and brought up the river and hoisted into position. And it looks really beautiful in the sunset. There's a lot of nice photographs of it at that time of day. There are plenty of smaller bridges in Sunderland which might be very handy for people, or maybe you've got a soft spot for them. So on the north side of the river, linking up Gill Bridge in Deptford, was the Gill Bridge itself. Now currently, with all the construction work going on, it's closed, so I don't know whether they're going to construct a new bridge there. The one that I know was fairly damaged condition, but the one before that was very, very droopy. You might have seen old pictures of it. So a bridge I also like is Roker Ravine Bridge, as you walk towards the beach. It's just a road bridge, you can't really notice when you're going in the car, but from underneath it looks very nice. A couple of footbridges I like is the one at Cox Green over the weir. That's a nice one. And there's a little footbridge over the railway track. It's between Stadium of Light and Seaburn Station. Back in the train spotting days, that was a good place to be. Just to finish off, a couple that I like personally were two National Coal Board bridges, which brought trains from Hetton and various places down to the coal staiths on the north side of the river. So there was a bridge over Eden House Road, and then another one over Chester Road. So we used to see the steam trains crossing over them in the 60s till they stopped about 1969.